Hi, it's Susan with Prayeriewife Quilting, and I have such a fun project for us today. We're going to make these really cute hexagon pin cushions, but we're going to make them on the sewing machine, so they're going to be really fast. They make a great gift for a quilty friend, someone who loves to sew. They're great for swaps and something that you can use in your sewing room. It doesn't take a lot of fabric, and it's so fun to fussy cut little images to make your and design your pin cushions. So let's get started. Okay, so the ones that I've made previously, I made with 1-inch hexagons, but the one that we're going to demonstrate today on the sewing machine, I made with 1.5-inch hexagons. It's a little bit easier to see with the larger pieces. And whichever size that you make, you'll want to get a clear template so you can see and center your images that you want to fussy cut. And it's helpful if you have the ones with the little holes at the intersections of the seam allowances. That way you can mark them so when you get to the sewing machine, you know where to start and stop. So what I've done is I've turned all the pieces over, and I have marked with my Hexagon pen and all the little holes. The Hexagon pens, if you haven't used those before, those disappear when you iron, so they're really handy for sewing. So I have already ironed my pieces, and I have already added a spray starch finish to them. I use the Mary Ellen's Best Press. I really like that. So these are already pressed, and the starch gives a nice finish, and it also makes the pieces a little bit crisper, so they're easier to handle, I think, at the sewing machine. So what you want to do after you've got all your pieces marked, and I've already done that, this is the piece for my back. You'll want to lay out all your pieces in the direction that they're going to go. So when you're grabbing them to go to the sewing machine, you've already got them in the correct orientation. Another thing that I want to point out is that you'll only be able to see the inside half of the pieces of the hexagon. So if you have a big bird here, for example, you'll only see the top of the bird. You'll just see the top half of your pieces when you're selecting your fabrics. But let's go ahead and go over to the sewing machine, and you're going to see just how quick and easy this is. Okay, so we're at the sewing machine, and we're going to go ahead and take 2 of our pieces, and I'm going to make sure that I have them oriented correctly. And I'm going to put them right sides together. And I'm just going to sew from the dot to the dot. And that's it. I'm not going to start from the edge. And I'm going to go ahead and put my needle down right in that dot. And if your machine has a locking stitch, go ahead and use that. Otherwise, you can make some tiny back stitches, but always do your stitching between the 2 dots and not outside. Even just 1 stitch on the outside, you'll be able to tell a little bit. So that's going to be your main focus for this project, is to keep the stitches just between the dots. So I'm going to just go down, and as soon as I get to the dot, I'm going to go ahead and do a locking stitch. And then we're going to add our next piece. And that one's going to go right here. So I'm just going to put these right sides together. And I don't know if you can see the little dots here, but they're right at 1/4 inches off each intersection. And again, we're just going to sew from dot to dot. And if you're going to err to one side or the other, err to the inside of those seam allowances. So I'm just going to go around, make sure I've got them oriented, and you can see how quick this goes. These are so much fun to fussy cut. And again, you're only talking about 8 hexagons. So whether you choose to hand sew it or to machine sew it, it's a super quick project. And one more stitch. Okay, and the next one. Who doesn't love a new pincushion? I tend to have them in different places in my sewing room. I have one next to my long arm sewing machine that I use for certain needles that I use for long arm quilting. Then of course I have one here next to my sewing machine, and just different places, one by my pressing station. So it's fun to make these pretty and fun. But look how quick this process is. We're almost finished with this top part. And so now I'm just going to connect these together to form my ring. Okay, so now we have our ring. I'm just going to double check real quick that I've got all my pieces oriented in the right direction. And now we're going to add our centerpiece for the top. Isn't that adorable? I've already had to stop and restart the video because my kitty came and jumped up right in the middle of the beginning of it. Okay, so here's the part that I want to point out. So these are what we call Y seams, and you notice I didn't say Y seams until now, that you could see how easy this is going to be. A lot of people hear Y seams and run the other direction. They're not hard. You can make a whole quilt of traditional paper piecing designs on your machine with Y seams. Once you get comfortable with it, they're not hard at all. So I'm gonna line up this piece with this piece back here, and you can see that I've just kind of pushed that away, and I'm just gonna sew here so it's not gonna catch this piece. And I've pushed that side away. You can feel with your fingers, so it may be hard to see, but you'll be able to feel. And let's go ahead and just sew from dot to dot. And one more stitch. Okay, and then I'm just going to swing this around. And line this up, move the pieces out of the way, and one more. Okay. If you prefer, you could use pins or clips. I don't feel like I really need them. You can really feel, again, with your fingers where you're at. So we're just going to go right down in that dot. Okay, so on the top piece, we are going to sew all 6 sides, but on the bottom piece we're actually going to leave an opening so we can stuff it with our stuffing. Okay, so we're just gonna keep going around and I'll be right back in a second. Okay. So I've just got 2 sides left. You can see how quick this is going. And again, it's only a total of 8 hexagons. Okay, one more side. And again, you can see how the other pieces are folded and pushed out of the way. So I'm not going to catch those. Okay. So once we've got the top piece sewn on, look at that. It was so quick to do. So now we need to sew the little side petals together right here. And so those are really easy. We're just going to fold these right sides together and sew from dot to dot. Got a bunch of threads to clip. So again, we're just going to sew these little outside petals together. And from one dot to the next. Okay, so there's 6 sides. I'm going to continue sewing around, sewing these petals together, and I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so I'm going to sew my last outside of my petals together. Whoops. And we're going to just sew the bottom piece on. So I've got all these together. And so again, we're going to go right sides together, and I think I'm going to orient the little can the same as the kitty's face, just for fun. And I'm just going to put right sides together. Again, push those seam allowances out, and just go from, you guessed it, dot to dot. I can make one of these in about 20 minutes from start to finish. I think it probably takes me just as long to pick out the fabrics. So maybe 20 minutes after I've selected the fabrics. So I'm just going to go around, and again, this is the step where I want to leave one of the sides open, because that's where we're going to stuff it with our walnut shells. I really like the walnut shells. Of course, if you have a nut allergy, you'll have to choose something else for your stuffing, but I really like it because it adds a little bit of weight, and it has some kind of property in it. I think it's the oils from the walnut shells that do something fantastic for the pins. I'm just about finished, but I just wanted to show you how easy this is on the sewing machine, and that Y seams really aren't scary. So I'm actually doing a whole quilt, a small quilt, on my machine. It's an English paper piecing pattern, but I'm sewing it together with my machine rather than by hand. Okay, so now we have one piece left open here so we can fill it. So now we want to turn it right side out. It's a little bit easier with the larger hexagons too to turn it right side out. The little 1-inch hexagons, that's probably one of the more challenging parts of the whole process. Okay. And let me reach back here. I'm going to grab my little poker thing. I got this at the fabric store. I'm so lucky. We have 3 local fabric stores here, and it's that purple thing, and I really like it for turning seams right side and poking out the little points without poking a hole in the fabric. You can use a chopstick or anything with a blunt tip on it, and you just want to poke out those little points on your hexagons. And here's the back and the front. Look how cute that is and how quick that went. But let's go over to the cutting table and we'll get this filled real quick. Okay, so here we are back at the cutting table, and I wanted to show you these cute pins I got online from Etsy. They're little Easter pins, and I'll put a link to those in the supplies at the end of the PDF. And we're going to go ahead and stuff this now. And so I have a funnel that I use just for crafting, and I'm just going to put the tip of the funnel in. And I got a big giant jug of walnut shells online, and you're just going to go ahead and fill it until it feels very full, until it's as full as you want. This one you can see is real squishy. I probably could have put a little bit more walnut shells in this one. This one feels a little bit firmer, so get that to where it feels good for you. But again, it's just filling it. If you have a nut allergy, or you're just concerned about gifting it to someone who might possibly have a nut allergy, you can use batting, or check online for other, I think you can use emery for stuffing. So let's say we have this filled up all the way. We're just going to use a needle and thread and sew this together as if it was as if it were a English paper piecing project without the paper. You're just going to do a blind stitch to go ahead and close that up, and that is it. That is so easy to do. Again, you can make these in a sitting real quick. Have fun with the fussy cutting. I think that's probably my favorite part, and I want to thank you for joining me today. And if you do happen to make any and post them on social media, I'd love if you would tag me at Prayeriewife so I can see it. And thank you again for stopping by.